Hi, I'm Othais, and this is Colt's old model improved pocket pistol. Well, a reasonable facsimile thereof. Given that it was designed to be very compact, you're likely struggling to see it clearly, so let's go ahead and plop this in the light box. This black powder, muzzle-loading, percussion cap-fired revolver, in its current configuration, is 8.9 inches long, with an overall weight of 1.6 pounds, making it very handy. The cylinder sports 5 openings that take a 31 caliber ball or bullet. Just a reminder, folks, every episode we do on these Colt percussion pistols inevitably elicits requests for appraisal and pricing of the legitimate and frankly very valuable originals. We do not provide these services. However, we are working closely with someone who does. Rock Island has been very kind to share their massive catalog of images with us, which happens to contain a lot of Colts because they have long been in the business of handling these antiques for collectors. Because they have been so strongly associated with collectible Colt firearms, you can, even today, browse a great many images of Colts that have come through their doors. This can be an excellent way of testing out the lessons learned in our episodes. Also, if you're curious about the more practical market instead of the theoretical history, you should really give them a holler and tell them we sent you. And while we're talking about black powder, no new shooter to the hobby should go without their own mixture of Ballistol and water that gives you moose milk, or, as I've found out more recently, Ballistol wipes. I actually ended up throwing some of these in my range bag, and because we were filming with black powder, I found a very nice use for these. Because I can use them not only to wipe the outside of a black powder gun immediately after being done shooting it, and therefore avoiding having a lot of rust by the time I get home, given that I drive an hour and 20 minutes to the range to film. I also figured out that if I go ahead and snip them down, I can use them as a rough patch, again, getting enough of the Ballistol oil in there to prevent significant problems again on that ride home. This made going ahead and washing these guns off afterwards a lot easier, so I'd highly recommend Ballistol, who, by the way, helps sponsor this show, so that's a win-win for everybody. Alright, today's episode is of course one in a series we've been producing on the early history of Colt's revolvers. Using reproductions, we've gone all the way back to his first Patterson model revolver, patented in 1836. Coming in a variety of sizes, this was unfortunately a commercial failure. Colt's next venture would be the 1847 Walker, a massive powerhouse, throwing a 44 caliber bullet that was frankly too big for its own britches. Designed for martial service and projecting overwhelming authority, the Walker managed to secure a government contract. Complications with the pistol, however, forced a smidge of scaling back in order to make it easier to carry and harder to self-detonate. This resulted in the Dragoon series of pistols, only slightly smaller than the Walker and still a clear military handgun. This is where we left off last time. Now, the Walker and Dragoon pistols were excellent improvements over the original Patterson, and frankly defined the core Colt lockwork all the way to the 1873. The US Army would, for the foreseeable future, be sticking with large bore handguns, so much so that one argument against the Colt was that the 44 caliber was too small. However, with martial contracts secured, Colt now needed to satisfy the civilian market if he wanted his business to actually grow. His attention turned to the obvious, a compact personal handgun that could fit in your pocket. Way back in the late 1830s, Samuel Colt had introduced the Patterson as either a pocket 28 caliber or belt size 31. The pocket had been especially unpopular, and while the belt did okay, it didn't hold much of a candle to the later 36 caliber holster model. Colt would actually end up abandoning the concept of a 28 caliber, well, for now anyway. But the 31 still had some merit, so much so that as he was chaotically rushing around forcing the Walker into existence during 1847, he was also apparently considering revisiting the notion of a pocket pistol. During his correspondence with Blunt and Sims about the possibility of production and sale of his military pistol, he was already being queried about the possibility of a cheaper belt pistol. His first significant commercial sale was for 12 of these big government revolvers to McGee, Tabor and Company, who also requested a smaller option, which Colt promised would come along soon. The first hint of action on the matter comes in an 1847 letter to J. Horseman and W. Huntington. It sports his usual creative spelling, In about 1 month, I can send you a pair of belt pistols weighing about 3 3/4 pounds each. I shall have another size receptive for the belt ready for the market in short time, and also a pocket size in course of a few months. We'll be able to furnish a small supply of the size adapted to the belt in a month or 6 weeks' time. Can also supply a size receptive to the pocket in about 3 or 4 months. He would not, however, make those deadlines. Instead, there would be a second contract for 1,000 of his Marshall revolvers, granted in November of 1847. As we've covered in our Walker and Dragoon episodes, this would take up the bulk of his available time for at least a while. As Samuel Colt slammed the guns into production, with frankly remarkable ingenuity both mechanically and financially, this at first required taking on a partnership with Whitney, producing his first run at the Whitneyville Armory. Following which, he leveraged all of his available funds and apparently damn near stealing machines still in use at Whitney for the government order to set up his own operation in Hartford, Connecticut. This first location was the Pearl Street factory, which he managed to prepare for the additional production of a pocket pistol in the summer of 1848. The very first pistols likely left the factory in late September or early October of that same year. In a December letter from Sam Houston, Colt was told, "When you do come, if you have a small pistol or will soon have one made of choice quality, I wish you to bring it with you, as I wish to purchase one." I did not know until a few days since. I then saw one for the first time and was greatly pleased with it. Colt also managed to recruit his old friend and in-law relative, Elijah K. Root, in order to be his factory's chief mechanic. Root would come on board in November and was likely the most responsible party for the actual physical evolution of the Colt revolvers going forward. Samuel was much more of an ideas man than he was the sort to actually implement incremental changes. Early examples of this new pocket pistol had been designed to be produced as cheaply as possible, while remaining reliable, guaranteeing a competitive price once on the market. It's been estimated that upwards of 85 operations were eliminated from the Dragoon production method in order to produce the simple pocket pistol. Initially, they lacked a loading ramrod. There was no cutout in the lower barrel assembly to aid with loading bullets or ball. The cylinders were bored straight, no fancy taper. During the first 100, there wasn't even a cutout in the breech shield for setting percussion caps. The cylinder was only bored with 5 chambers. While there was room for 6, this limit was likely taken to be doubly secure of the thickness of the chamber walls, especially given the previous troubles with the Walker. The barrels appear to have been produced in batches depending on their length. Standard options were 3-inch, 4-inch, 5-inch, and 6-inch. A 5-inch barrel model weighed in at just 22 ounces, making it very portable. Even more so than the Dragoon, the pocket model would see a lot of little improvements, resulting in a wide variety of features which change frequently over the years. The earliest guns used an internal V-shaped mainspring like the Walker, though we can't see it here in this image. The wood grip was a bit thin with a noticeable drop at the rear. The triggers were short and narrow, frankly a bit too delicate. The grip strap and trigger guard were made of brass and would mostly remain that way. However, it's worth noting that these were silver plated from the factory. It's just that over time, most have worn out, revealing the brass. While we're talking original finish, the barrel, cylinder, and screws were blued, the frame and hammer case hardened. The trigger guard was square backed, just like the same on the Walker and then current early Dragoons. As a matter of fact, collectors often call the early pocket models the Baby Dragoon. This was never, however, an official designation, and I've never seen evidence of it being used at the time the gun was sold. The official name is Colt's Pocket Pistol. Alright, let's carry on. Looking at the cylinder, the stops were near perfectly round, as would be the locking bolt, again invisible in this photo. The rolled-on engraving was also a simplification of the Dragoon's Ranger and Indian fight scene with no background. The work was so slapdash that it frankly overran the cylinder, making it cut off abruptly at the muzzle end. Now, I obviously don't have any of the original pocket pistols here. My reproduction from the intro is also clearly of different construction. I did actually attempt to find one of the Baby Dragoons in a reproduction and met with only partial success. But there is, wrong guy, just enough here to see some of the early features. So let's get a closer look. All right, here we have, well, a fair to middling reproduction, and then in terms of reliability, quite awful. But this is the size and shape of an early style of pocket model. Just for comparison, here is our reproduction of the Dragoon. So this is a fairly significant deviation in terms of size. We're going down from a 44 to a 31, and we are saving a lot of mass for that effort. This is an unreasonable thing to have anybody carry around outside of a military service. This is practically pocketable. That might be why they named it as such. Let's get a little closer look. All right, coming in a little tighter, we can see that this reproduction, which by the way is unnamed, it just says made in Italy. I'm uncertain who the manufacturer was. I'm sure some of you that are better versed at these reproductions would let me know. But whoever it was, they were definitely emulating the early baby Dragoon pattern of pocket pistol. There's some problems with their decisions, and frankly, the construction is poor enough that this is no longer operable, so we won't be shooting this gun today. However, I think it'll give us enough of a tour to see what's going on, and also gives you a little look at what is technically available in the market in the reproduction lines, if a little janky. So, what do we have that's correct? Well, we lack a loading arm. Good. We have a cross key wedge for the barrel, although this one has a spring clip in it. That would be a much later addition. This should have been solid at about this period, I believe. Only the first 100 or so did not have the scalloping, so that's all right that it's there. Most of them would have had it regardless. The gun is, of course, a single action only operation, and it has a half cock notch that we can use to set our percussion caps. However, these were never intended to be loaded entirely assembled. You can tell because of how small this gap is here. If we flip it over to the other side, there's no provision or cutaway for allowing a bullet to fit in there. I mean, there's just no room to actually push a bullet in here without really making some iffy moves and not having a clear path to pack it in properly. No, you're supposed to load this disassembled. To do that, you would drive out this wedge, which is not going to take a whole lot of pressure on this particular gun. And then, yeah, that shouldn't just fly out like that, but we're going to put that down to the reproduction quality. And you slide this guy out, slide your cylinder out, and then you would load your powder and your ball or bullet. And then, actually, this is kind of interesting. This reproduction accurately recreates, you know what, let me fix that focus. It actually reproduces a concave face on the arbor. This was meant to fit into the round ball or bullet's nose whenever you load into the cylinder, which means loading would be done, well, like this: powder, ball, and then press. This being not the best reproduction, well, I'm not surprised to find that this arbor doesn't actually fit in the chamber like it's supposed to. Another reason why we can't use this for an actual live fire demonstration. Plus, the quality of that cut is a little... oh boy. While I have the cylinder out, I will say the engraving is at least accurate in the sense that it doesn't have a background. This is the early style... oh, I'm sorry, I'm blocking a lot of light. This is the early style of engraving. However, it fits nicely onto the cylinder and doesn't just sort of hang off, which means it's not that great. See how squared up this Colt's mark is? The originals are a bit not as well fit. The cylinder stops are incorrect because these are rectangular, which technically didn't exist at all in this gun ever. They were round originally, changing to oval and then eventually rectangular with a scallop. We'll see that again in a moment. Otherwise, if we look at the back, this one's been modified because it used to have 5 safety pin positions, but 4 of them have been filed off in an attempt to make it more accurate. Instead, it has just the singular safety pin right there for resting the hammer. Let me show you how that might work. Having loaded the cylinder off the gun, then reassembled it with the hammer in the half-cock position, we can then rotate to set our 5 percussion caps, and we would then have to find our 1 safety nipple, at least in early production. That's actually here, might be a little hard for you guys to see. I need to guide that over to the correct position on the other side, and then I have to cock the hammer back, and oops, oh, I over-traveled. Well, let's try that again. I'd have to... oh boy. Go to the half-cock position, roll this guy down with the safety nipple 2 positions away, cock that to full cock, start lowering the hammer, then index this guy over. I'm sorry if that's a little hard to see, but we end up setting the hammer on the safety pin right between two of the chambers, in only one possible position, which again, not ideal because we're having to do a lot of manual index and eyeballing and remembering our positions, but it's there. At this point, the cylinder can't rotate, well, not a lot, and pulling the trigger does nothing, it's a single action only. You must recock the hammer, which, oh, what a great reproduction this is. There we go. Recock the hammer, and then we could fire. That would be the way the gun would work normally. And just so you guys can see it, there's the crude notch for the safety pin. Originally, in the earliest production, this would have been a straight hole, a hole that aligned with the pin. Later, the notch was found to be easier to cut, and these come in a variety of configurations, actually, depending on production. One of those minor details we're not going to get too deep on. Realistically, the best thing going for this gun in terms of depicting an early model is the fact that it has a square back trigger guard, and again, that very short gap here. Most of the, let's say, Baby Dragoon reproductions that do have the square back trigger guard from Uberti did not go ahead and make a distinctly different frame and barrel assembly in order to get the correct shorter gap. That would be probably a little too much expense for them in terms of their low prices in their reproduction. So, points in one regard, if you took the time to rebuild this properly, you would have a more accurate version of the gun than you would get from, say, Uberti when they do their Baby Dragoons. Fun fact, on the earliest pistols, Colt's branding was as depicted, legible when the gun was held in the left hand. But of course, most people are right-handed, so it would be swapped around the other way. Never miss an opportunity. Now, I'm going to try to cover some of the major changes to this pistol through our episode today, but I'm not going to do all of them. There are already copious volumes for sale on all of those little details. There is, however, a sort of linear progression, disregarding, of course, custom orders like full silver plating, ivory grips, or engraved frames. Okay, with this little guy loosely covered, don't forget Colt's earlier promise. A pocket and a belt model would be in production soon. The 1851, however, took several additional years, as if you couldn't tell by the date. We'll cover this in more detail later, but part of the story might be explained by Samuel Colt's business decisions, which also affect our pistol today. With his pocket model in the market, Sam decided to make a European expedition, sailing to England in the spring of 1849, and then on to France, Belgium, Austria, and Prussia. In each nation, he filed patents and attempted to secure various contracts. He also repeatedly tried to get audiences with royalty and state officials. He was often stymied by being a mere common American, which would actually become his reason for seeking out his technical colonelship. Colt did manage to double up on his chances for success by also helping a friend market steamships and surplus rifles to the Ottoman Empire for a commission, of course. So a stop was made in Constantinople and an audience secured with Abdul Majid I, who was gifted a set of customized Dragoon pistols. It's likely that this trip, combined with the limitations of his current manufacturing facilities, hampered his introduction of a belt-sized pistol. That means from 1848 through 1850, Colt had his hands full just fulfilling orders for the 44 caliber Marshall Dragoon and the 31 caliber pocket pistol, which was actually something of an instant success. We'll talk more about its popularity in a moment, though. The Colt pocket pistol's long production life means that it came before and even outlived several other models. Its immediate contemporary was the early Dragoon, and it preceded the famous 1851 Navy. It was still in production by the time of the 1860, and frankly only left the market when consumers switched exclusively to cartridge guns. So, incremental changes show up over time as Colt rolls further improvements from other lines into the humble pocket pistol. Colt produced his parts in batches and would never waste what was on hand for a new idea. These new features often appear thousands of units ahead of the old feature finally disappearing for good. There are a lot of transitionals in the pocket line. First, let's cover what I like to think of as the first hump. In collector circles, the earliest pattern pocket pistols are known as Baby Dragoons or Model 1848s. These are generally identified as pistols without loading levers and with straight back trigger guards. Although again, thanks to the wide transitional periods, you can find straight backs with loading levers, which to the best of my knowledge are still considered Baby Dragoons by most people. Let's explore that a bit though. Sometime around serial number 100, the capping groove is introduced. Somewhere around serial 850, that barrel marking goes from left-handed to right-handed. Somewhere around 5,700, the round cylinder stops become oval-shaped. Again, just a reminder, lots of overlap between features. Also, I am not going into detail on every little change, as all sorts of profiles or thicknesses were altered as well. This is just the highlights. Around 10,500, the cylinder scene was changed. A more detailed and seemingly better fitting engraving, it now depicted a stagecoach holdup, which is very telling of the market at the time, especially for a holdout gun. Loosely in the serial range of 11,600, rectangular stops with a leading taper were introduced into production. These helped prevent over-travel the cylinder. About this time, several other major changes were included. The singular safety pin became 5, one for each chamber. The cylinder ratchet teeth were changed in shape. The V mainspring was swapped to a flat spring, and the hammer fitted with a roller. Some examples begin to appear with early loading levers. This circa 11 to 12,000 serial range, and especially the next 2,000 more, where so many changes are put into effect, well, it's my suspicion that it coincides with Colt relocating his first factory. Back in 1847, Samuel Colt had been told that there would be a factory building on Grove Lane available for rent in the near future. Well, when his lease ran out on Pearl Street in 1848, he began extending it on a simple monthly basis, clearly trying to transition to a new facility. I've had difficulty pulling a hard date for when Colt began to occupy Grove Lane, but it seems that he actually managed to maintain both properties for some time as he carefully moved his operations over, minimizing the effect on his overall production numbers. Again, a lot of this work was likely handled by Elijah K. Root, Colt's still fresh chief mechanic and husband to his cousin Matilda. I suspect that Grove Lane provided more room and more equipment opportunities, which enabled Sam Colt to improve his pistols, both the Dragoon and the pocket model. It would also be a good time to introduce some new methods when you're having to restart the various machines anyway. If I had to guess, I'd say the pocket guns with loading rams, upgraded mainsprings, and hammers were the fruits of this expansion, as would be the next model. Further changes to the pocket Colt would result in what some consider to be a distinct firearm. Around serial number 14,500, the loading ramrod had become standard, albeit light in construction at first. And the frame was lengthened 3/16 of an inch. This was likely done to provide more clearance for bullets or balls loaded while the pistol was assembled. The rear end of the barrel was further extended to fill the gap. A cutout has been made in the barrel assembly in order to further facilitate loading pointed bullets. A round back trigger guard was introduced, which was easier on the draw. This round trigger guard, by the way, is considered the defining feature by collectors of the Model 1849, the not Baby Dragoon. However, from our perspective, this is simply just another feature evolution of the pocket model. Around this same time, the short, flimsy trigger was bulked up, and what's popularly known as the grease groove, which had been present on some examples as early as 11,500, had become a definite standard feature. Originally called helical grooves, we can actually see them on my reproduction early Baby Dragoon, which is honestly not correct, but we don't have a lot of hope for this gun as it is. These would act as a scraper that would draw fouling into the grooves. This keeps the revolver from binding as quickly when being used with black powder. Over the course of production, Colt would purchase land south of Hartford known unsurprisingly as the South Meadows, eventually setting up his own massive factory works, but that transition seems to have been less impactful on the design of the pocket pistol, which was largely solidified beforehand. Alright, give or take a couple minor features, that gets us to our pistol here. So, once again, let's take a closer look. Yes, now we have a usable firearm, because this is a reproduction provided by Uberti, who do a wonderful job with these old Colts. Not perfect, but wonderful. So, I know if you're just glancing at these, the number one distinguishing feature is probably that barrel length, but don't forget, this was offered and this was offered in a variety of barrel lengths. So ignore the fact that they happen to be in two different configurations in that regard. What's really critical, well, according to collectors, what's really critical is the difference in this trigger guard. I find that to be dubious at best. I think there's a much more significant change that we need to see. But if you're curious why, the sharp edge of this could hang up on a pocket or holster when drawn. For a concealable weapon, that is a pain, so this guy was rounded out, much easier on the draw. Also, just a reminder, from factory, This brass would have been silver plated. It'd be more correct to see one of these with silver over the brass. All right, let me go ahead and get this. Actually, I need this guy because let's look at that more significant change. Because if I flip this guy over, and let's do that, because one of the things that this reproduction, the old guy, does better is that it does show the correct gap here at the front of the cylinder. This gun was designed to be taken apart in order to be loaded. This one is designed to be loaded as is, which means they had to increase this gap between the cylinder and the barrel assembly. Not the barrel, the assembly. Because the barrel was pushed back in order to fill that gap. Now we have room to drop in a 31 round ball and use our loading lever, or 31 bullet. We actually have a little bit of a nip out of the frame in order to drop in there. Of course, you would put powder and then your ball, and then you would align the whole thing, of course, in half cock, and then you'd use your little lever, which is oh so friggin' adorable. Push real hard and then clicker back into place. Do that 5 times and you're in business. Well, you have to cap it, but you get the idea. This means that there's no disassembly and constant reassembly of the gun. It is more recommended to take it apart and clean it after firing it, though, especially in the black powder era. So that change, this gap change, is to me probably the most significant change in the production of this pistol. I understand that they also did things like this gun, in theory, should have had a V-spring, although this reproduction does not. This gun should have a flat spring. This gun should not have a roller on the hammer. This gun should have a roller on the hammer and does. Those sort of things. But this manufacturing change is very significant because it changed the size of the frame. The frame was pushed forward some, and the barrel was pushed further down into the assembly, had to be recut with a taper and all this other stuff. This represents a fair bit of financial difficulty when we're talking about production. And so in my eyes, that gap is really the big difference between the old baby Dragoon and the new 1849. But I'm not the man that dictates the entire market. That's just how I see it. Now, just to be sure I cover all my bases, this is a single action only black powder percussion revolver. Nothing fancy there. There are, as far as I've been able to tell, 2 issues with this gun as assembled by Uberti. Number 1 is the fact that the cylinder was actually double engraved. I guess they kind of messed up. It actually kind of hurts my eyes because it looks almost like it's supposed to be viewed with 3D glasses, but it's not. Ugh. More importantly to me, the odd thing that Uberti has done is they opted for only 1 safety pin, whereas our poor reproduction had 5, but 4 of them had been shaved off. This should be 5 safety pins, allowing us to set down the hammer whenever we want in order to put the gun into safe. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention. This cutaway for the bullet, which we did point out a little bit earlier, this would get more aggressive as time went on, and the bullet shape was more commonly used over the ball. These guns would have shipped with a mold that would provide you with the ability to cast 1 bullet and or 1 ball. So bullets were very much a thing for the pocket model. These pistols also shipped with a small flask. In the US, these usually have one of 2 eagle motifs. As we'll see in a moment, English production used a simpler bag style. An L-shaped combination screwdriver and nipple wrench was also standard. Now internally, how this thing actually works isn't really any different from the late model Dragoon, which we actually saw in our last Reprocussion episode. So let's save a little time and skip right to shooting this little darling. Okay, this thing is adorable. Now, when we filmed this, we actually used round ball ammo, but there was at the time an option to cast a proper bullet with the included mold. Thanks to Era's Gone bullet molds, we actually have that same option. Let's take a little look. These guys are fairly small. As a matter of fact, here is a 44 round ball. As you can see, yeah, we've lost a fair bit of mass, but we do get to have, a nice little healed bullet, an actual pointed bullet, coming out of a rifled barrel in a diminutive package. This is actually fairly good for defense at that time. At the 30-foot defensive range we filmed, these were not making enough of a difference to really be worth a separate segment, especially because, we'll talk to Mae in a minute, the percussion caps were a little troublesome. However, let me show you something of an experiment. We had a guest star take aim at 95 yards with one of the bullets, and... Oh,
it's so cute.
That is a 31 pocket at what I believe is 90 yards. So, if you have one of these 49ers, do make sure to check out Era's Gone. They have been extremely helpful in the production of these Reprocussion episodes, and I would highly recommend their product. This has not, by the way, been paid for. They're just that nice. Now, there will obviously be some more changes to this little guy, but the pocket model lasted quite a few years, and will probably start to wander too far away from its place in history if we overstretch ourselves. So let's go ahead and talk about early sales, because this little gun would be extremely profitable. Most famously because of westward expansion. By 1848, the US government was already encouraging the spread of settlers into the American West. This was an extension of the policy of Manifest Destiny. Matters were helped along more rapidly by the discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill in California. This stimulated a mad rush of men and even families striking out west to find their fortunes. However, the westward frontier was open and empty, largely devoid of police or even army presence. People tended to migrate in large traveling groups with experienced men paid to guide the way. And because of the ongoing Indian Wars, the only people that were actually out there at the time in any numbers, the prevalence of banditry from the people that have already wandered out there ahead of you, and even the possibility of hostile wildlife, well, that all meant that people rather travel armed. Now, obviously, for most of the above, the firearm of choice would be a rifle, and there were plenty of those, sure enough. But what about all those little occasions where a lone man or woman might be in a mix of practically strangers that they don't entirely trust? What about protection of the individual distinct from the traveling group? Personal protection, something in high demand in times of change and in lands without strong community roots. Now, everyone loves the mythos of the cowboy, but in most of those books and movies, the stories we're so familiar with, they're usually post-American Civil War, if not all the way into the 1880s. No, this was the old West, and historical accuracy of those movies aside, there weren't a lot of people wearing the big iron literally on their hip. A big part of that, by the way, came down to cost. Now, I haven't found a reliable source of the market price of the pocket pistol, but reading around the edges, it seems that they were going for about $20 retail to the Army Models 25. A steep price, but I'm sure that there were some discounts to be had depending on order numbers, etc., and still a cheaper, handier weapon than the average, while maintaining a reputation for reliability, and of course, providing more firepower than a compact single-shot pistol. By this time, we also see pepper boxes appearing, multi-barreled revolving pistols that could be quite compact, but because of the duplication of barrels, were always heavier and more cumbersome. So the Colt would remain an excellent choice for a number of years. Stuffing one in your pocket provided a good friend on a bad night, be it in the dark streets of an eastern city or a slapdash mining town in the wilds of California. The latter, of course, required you to carry gold or coin on hand and lacking in banks or often even safes. Because of the high demand for firearms, and the Colt specifically, the price paid for one in California could be put into the hundreds of dollars. This demand, curiously combined with Army orders, would also provide Colt with his own sales agent in California. Major Amos B.B. Eaton, graduate of West Point, had risen to captain during his service in Florida, which is likely when he first experienced the potential of a Colt revolver. Later serving in Mexico, he would be revetted to major before being deployed under Percifer Smith in California Territory. About this time, the Army was losing men to gold fever desertion, so Smith wisely kept the rope loose and encouraged his men to work on the side. Some panned for gold, some made money surveying. Eaton, however, well, he had actually married a woman named Elizabeth Selden. For those of you who saw our Patterson episode, yes, that's Cousin Dudley's side of the family. Initially, Eaton made contact with Elijah Colt, who was a partner at that time in the Collins Axe Company, and started distributing hardware in California. But the Colt pistols would soon follow along. He would end up accounting for thousands sold into the West Coast at the height of gold fever. His account book alone, running from 1851 into 1854, accounted for $76,474.81 of Colt pistols and accessories sold. Now, Samuel Colt wasn't the only one making a profit on the westward expansion. Another big player to emerge specifically from this event would be Wells Fargo. This express company, responsible for carrying mail, money, and gold, was notably founded after the first examples appear of what was supposedly a pistol developed by their request. You see, this is what collectors like to call the Wells Fargo model, an improved Colt pocket pistol with the round trigger guard, but no loading lever. Almost all of these sport 3-inch barrels, which is the real reason for ditching the Ram. There was simply no room for it, as it had to go onto a 4-inch. Serial surveys show that these were likely made in batches on rare occasions. Other researchers have dug deep to find the Wells Fargo connection, and while a couple of guns have turned up etched with that name, it's more likely than not that they were faked and no way legitimate. Records are apparently fairly intact, and Wells Fargo has no recording of buying any pistol using a .31 caliber projectile. I can forgive thinking that this was a custom request though, as they are very few in number. The 3-inch barrel without loading lever wasn't very popular. It would come to be the worst selling and therefore least represented version of the Colt pocket pistol, so that makes it rare, and now ironically the most appreciated version. It seems some extremely small number were possibly fitted with rammers from the factory, likely years after they sat in inventory. This would be in an attempt to unload them on the market. These, however, likely proved too little leverage to be comfortable to use. Does look kinda cute though. Alright, so far in episode we have covered one ever-evolving pocket pistol which has developed at least 3 names. How about a 4th? Because Samuel Colt wasn't content to just visit faraway lands, he wanted to manufacture in them. He believed that the British government would be his gateway to Europe and began what would become a monumental effort to establish an English factory. That's because if he wanted to sell to the Empire, he knew he'd have to provide them with British-made guns. He managed to lease a factory near the Vauxhall Bridge, just across from the prison. Unfortunately, the English gunsmiths were not happy to have the Americans strolling in, and with his promise of machines replacing labor, he struggled to win friends among the workers either. Colt would be dogged by red tape, committees, community outrage, and everything else that could be whipped up by major players like Greener and Adams. Now the London Colts have their own serial line, and their own subset of features. That is frankly a matter left for detailed books for people who want to know every little shift, because they're trying to identify Grandpa's secret treasure. This is Reprocussion, the poor man's Colt history. It appears they started with American parts assistance, but would soon shift into full production. These appear in 4, 5, and 6-inch configurations. No 3 inches or rammerless Wells Fargo models were produced in London. British sensibility can be seen in the trigger guard and the backstrap, which shifted to largely being made of iron instead of the soft US brass. These guards appear both in the original smaller dimensions and an improved larger opening with trigger to match. This larger opening might have been developed for the British market, which was actually a market that Colt could not conquer. Having been stonewalled, he was forced eventually to give up the money-losing factory, stopping production in 1856 and closing down in 1857. Extra parts from London would likely be shipped home to the US and wound up in standard production. This might, again my complete speculation, explain the introduction of the larger trigger guard into the US market. Both the small and large iron trigger guards start appearing in US production, albeit rarely, around serial number 112,000. This could mean that's when the excess arrived and was woven into the assembly line. The larger guard must have been preferred, and perhaps the machine responsible for making it was brought back to the US, because US brass guards get bigger around serial number 150,000. Now, at least one author has speculated that Colt intentionally marked the London parts made Colts differently from the rest. I frankly don't agree and haven't seen evidence to truly back him up. This conjecture comes from a change of address on the barrel. The initial marking for the pocket pistol was a 2-line layout claiming Colts of New York, which actually saw a few variations in styling. This, by the way, is the London marking, in case you're curious. Around serial number 170,000, this 2-line layout Hartford addressed marking appears. This is supposedly an indicator for London parts, but it seems a bit unlikely, mostly because it appears around 1860, well after the London factory had been shut down. Truth be told, it's more likely that as the last die wore out, the next one ordered was just set for Hartford out of pride for the actual factory, and the growing recognition of the region having become an industrial town. However, it does seem that Hartford wasn't as marketable, especially internationally, as New York City. That's because around serial number 187,000, a new single-line New York address marking appears sometime during the Civil War. Alright, while explaining all that, we kinda overstepped ourselves just a bit, so let's rewind some. Back in 1855, Colt released a new pocket pistol, popularly known as the Root Sidehammer today. This was simply the new model pocket pistol at the time. We are not covering this revolver here, but I will say apparently some few reproductions were made, but remain rarer than the originals. Despite competition from its own family line, the now old model pocket pistol continued to see strong sales and even further improvements. Around serial number 187,000, the same time as the last address change, we begin to see a 6-shot cylinder being offered as optional for the pocket pistol. These are said to have made use of better steel quality, but metallurgical testing back in the 1950s kind of ruled that out. They just bored more holes, it seems. While the 6-shot was initially quite popular, by the end of production, it appears that the 5-shot had actually won back out. I guess people trusted what they knew. Around serial number 260,000, the hammer knurling was improved, or at least mechanized, and shortly thereafter, the loading catch was made broader and easier to use. Somewhere in all of this, the grip width was jumped up, and the backstrap's drop changed. And while all that was happening, the US was growing more and more unstable. The North and South were having just a wee bit of a disagreement, which broke down into a series of state secessions. And on April 12, 1861, Fort Sumter was bombarded and the US Civil War was begun. In this conflict, both sides scrambled for arms. Both would come up short at first, although the northern manufacturing would ultimately put it ahead in wartime production overall, while a little .32 pistol like this was not the ideal military arm, not particularly useful in warfare. It was, at that time, a handy multi-shot of excellent quality. It was also inexpensive and, most importantly, available. While all of Colt's pistols would serve, the pocket model was very popular in the private purchase market. It's seen frequently in photographs of Union and Confederate troops alike. Colt initially sold to both sides of the conflict, although this brought some heat that we'll discuss in another episode someday. His pistols, however, were always prized weapons of exceptional quality. Again, a reliable friend in tumultuous times. Interestingly, the US government would also purchase this pocket pistol on at least 3 separate occasions. The first was actually long before the war. In 1852, some 50 were purchased for the Navy. Their exact configuration is unknown, nor is their intended destination. Another 120 were purchased during the war, in December of 1861. These were purchased from B. Kitteridge and Company of Ohio. This same lot also included 50 examples of a newer model. This was what's known as the Pocket Navy, an old model pocket frame fitted for a .36 caliber cylinder. Okay, this is where our timeline for episodes gets all messed up, and I have to give a quick lecture. The 36 caliber Colt Navy, often called the Model 1851, had been an extremely popular handgun, so much so that its medium-sized frame was the most popular thing in handgun ergonomics. Unfortunately, the military still wanted a 44 caliber pistol. So, Colt saved himself a lot of time and money in terms of machine cost and managed to keep everyone happy at the same time by simply using the Navy frame and the back third of the Navy cylinder with an oversized set of chambers at the front. This jumped up cylinder required a matching cut in the frame, allowing the Model 1860 to have the same dimensions as the 1851, but a larger bore. The same magic was also applied to the pocket frame, resulting in a jump up to 36 caliber on a pocket-sized gun, which I have a reproduction of right here. So, Lightbox. With an overall length of 10 1/2 inches and weighing in at 1.7 pounds. This is a fair bit larger than our previous pocket, and yet smaller than an 1851. However, it still manages a 36 caliber ball. We are limited to just 5 shots. Once more, percussion cap, muzzle loading, black powder, you guys get the idea. This little guy has been quite controversial, and because of that, this is the part where I have to remind everyone that I am a history consolidator. On very rare occasion, when I have time and the right connections, I have managed to get some primary research done, usually with one of various friends who have more access than I do, but haven't been asked the right questions just yet. This is not one of those occasions. Instead, I am deferring to an authority. That would be the authors of the excellent book, Colt's Pocket 49, who have stated that this model was purchased by the US government in 1861. That's pretty critical because claims on the origin of this pistol range from 1853 all the way through 1865. Documentation is slim to none, and the argument has apparently raged for some time. If you'd like to find one of these reproductions, they're usually marketed as the Model 1862 Pocket Navy. So yeah, there's some confusion. Let's get a look at it though. Alright, here's our old model pocket as it were, and here is our Pocket Navy. Ooh. Realistically, there's actually not a lot of mechanical difference between these two guns. The big change is here in this cylinder. Notice that at the rear, it is the same diameter as the original pocket model. The frame's the same, practically everything's the same. Except the forward 2/3 of this cylinder are bigger. They're just a larger diameter, like a cup. And you have this little notch in the frame that goes all the way through to fit this bigger diameter. This allows you to have 5 shots of 36 caliber ball. Just for comparison's sake, we get this guy instead of that guy. And depending on how deeply we're loading it, we might be getting a little more powder. So really not a lot to it, which is frankly brilliant in terms of being able to reuse available parts and tooling. Alright, since there's not much else to say, let's go ahead and give it to Mae. That has a little more spice on the meatball. Now, the story of the Pocket Navy is rather truncated, as it is largely replaced by its immediate successor, the Pocket Police, which clearly shared lines with the larger model of 1860. However, it kept the pocket frame. So, let's get back on the rails with the original Pocket 49. It's worth noting the two previously mentioned US contracts have no apparent markings associated with them, nor were any serials recorded. To date, there is no way to positively ID an 1852 or 1861 contract pocket model. A third batch of unknown quantity apparently came to the US Navy through unusual means in 1861. In a nutshell, with the outbreak of war, some major cities formed Union Defense Committees. New York's would be put in charge of $1 million of appropriations. Some of these funds went to arming the chartered steamship Quaker City in, frankly, a mad rush, taking only 4 days. It was apparently worth the effort, though, as the Quaker City went on to be an effective blockader. Chartered at the end of April 1861, it claimed capture of 8 ships by the end of July. In August, it was purchased by the Navy outright, and in December, it was returned to New York for commissioning. And this is, most likely anyway, the point at which the third batch of Colt Pockets made it into the US Navy stores. These Hartford-marked 5-shots had 5-inch barrels. Being from the Union Defense Committee, they generally have a UDC marking on the butt, although this one took 2 attempts to get that D in the correct orientation. Once in Navy hands, they usually received an anchor mark up on the barrel, but not always. Sometimes they are found with USN stamped on the backstrap, but not this one. Most commonly, there will be a P over GG marking on the cylinder wall. This is a proofing mark and the initials for Gert Gansevoort, US Navy Inspector and Commander in charge of Ordnance for New York. I make no guarantees on the pronunciation of his name. It seems no gun has all 4 markings, and the few that have turned up have random mixtures of 1 to 3 of the possible markings. This is why percussion Colts give me a headache. Now, about the same time, Samuel Colt would pass away due to complications from gout, specifically on January 10, 1862. Tragedy struck again in February of 1864 when the massive South Meadows Colt factory burned almost completely down. Again, a story for another episode. Even so, the works were rebuilt, and the old model pocket pistol, replaced in 1855, improved in 1861, and if you count the compact Police 36, replaced again in 1862, resumed production. As a matter of fact, it's a bit difficult to say when assembly stopped on this guy. The parts were done in large batches and assembled later. Now, obviously, post-Civil War breech loaders and cartridge loaders became the norm. Percussion cap was on the way out. The Roll and White patent, however, locked Colt's firearms out of the new technology for some years, and so the pocket pistol became less and less popular, but remained in production. Assembly was likely done in fits and spurts all the way up until 1873, when Colt finally entered the cartridge market properly. I say properly because earlier on they actually put a toe in with, of all things, the pocket model. With production likely beginning in 1868 and marketing in 1869, weirdly about the same time Smith & Wesson's white patent ran out, a cartridge conversion system was patented by F. Alexander Thur in September of 1868. This was a method for converting Colt's Revolver into using a metallic cartridge. This was, of course, muzzle-loaded in order to avoid White's patent. It also included an interesting spring-loaded safety mechanism. The final product entered production that same year and was likely marketed in 1869. The Thur conversion pockets were not replaced in a hurry and were likely an attempt to further unload a surplus of parts that had stacked up. Still, by 1873, Colt had to give up, but that didn't mean that they stopped selling the old model pocket. The last recorded sale from Colt Records apparently shipped in 1889. That is extremely impressive. From the lists I have available, the highest known serial is 332,993. Since these were sequential, lots of authors have assumed roughly 340,000 were produced, but that's a lot of rounding up, and it makes 2 dangerous assumptions. One is that Colt actually shipped every pistol that it serialized, and that none were lost in proof testing or simply scrapped due to errors in assembly. It also assumes that the last several thousand all were eventually sold and not somehow scrapped out when they sat in inventory for too long. It's actually very hard to know just how many were made, and yet it barely matters because the old model pocket pistol remains one of Colt's most successful products ever. It dwarfed Dragoon production by an order of magnitude, and then multiply that. Its closest competitor, the 1851 Navy, clocks in at around 257,000 units, although again, there are some issues to be explored here better later. The point being, the pocket pistol was more than likely the biggest link in the financial backbone of Colt's patent firearms manufacturing company during the percussion era, and the era in which Samuel Colt was alive. This was the golden ticket, the humble but affordable pocket pistol. Now, before I bring Mae in here, I want to gift you all with a final mystery. Over the years, a number of Colt pocket models loosely grouped into a fairly reasonable serial block have turned up looking like this. The recoil shield has been cut back all the way around, helping to expose the percussion caps further. The exact utility is hard to understand. Was it so that you could cap the pistol easier? Was it so that you could decap the pistol easier? Honestly, seems like a risky way to carry a pocket pistol, as you're more likely to bump off a cap that you'd rather keep on. Currently, there is no evidence for a solid explanation. Well, there's always something undiscovered out there for y'all to play with. Alright, let's go get a more satisfying and straightforward answer about Mae's opinion on these diminutive dynamos. Alright, once more we've made room for Mae.
That he did.
And we have a smattering of Colt pocket pistols. But
That's like your new favorite word, by the way. You use smattering like an episode or two in a row.
What's wrong with smattering?
It's a good word. I'm just saying. It's your word
Very
now.
judgy of you. Anyway, we have a selection. It's not really a smorgasbord, is it? It's
No,
just a smattering.
It is a smattering. It's not a charcuterie board of them, though.
Okay, it's a weak one if it is.
Yeah, it's pretty weak.
Yeah. All right, so we have the pocket pistols, but
That we
before
do.
you even pick up one of those,
Okay.
I want to set the tone here because a lot of the time in collector circles, we forget what came first. So, in our series so far, you've shot the Patterson. Mm-hmm. You have shot
The Patterson.
Yeah, the Patterson.
Double Patterson.
You have shot although that second Patterson, I'm still really confused about some of the Patterson history as far as the loading rods and stuff.
Yeah, that's fair. All I know is that I've done Patterson with and without lever.
Right. Then Colt Walker. Mm-hmm. And then the
Double Dragoons. Yeah.
Which was really just the newer Army model, right?
Yeah. Basically a Walker a little bit smaller.
Arguably, the Walkers the Dragoons are just Walkers. They're just modified Walkers.
Right.
And then the pockets are shrunk down
Pattersons?
I guess they'd be like tiny Walkers at first.
Oh, well, that's true. Yeah, they're more like the Walker.
Because they had the V-spring and everything else, just like a little tiny Walker.
Okay.
And then it keeps evolving. And it evolves so much so that it ends up sharing features with the Colt 1851 that came after the introduction of the initial pocket model. So it's like you get to the 1851 and all these features come in and they get woven into a new gun, and they also at the same time get woven into one old gun.
Yeah.
And so from the modern context, a lot of people like to think just in size terms. So they think like Walker, and then they think Dragoon, and then they think like the 1860 and the 1851 roughly the same, right?
Sure.
And then they kind of come down from there, and maybe they think of the Pocket Navy or the Pocket Police, but a lot of people don't even know about those.
True.
So they go straight from like, it's like big boy is Walker or Dragoon, middle boy is 1851,
Okay.
little boy is the Pocket, right?
Makes sense. They go in progression in terms of size.
Right, but that's not how it happened. How it happened was you had one of these,
Yep.
or you could buy this. And for a while there, those were your two options. The Walker was already out of production. So from Colt, this was their catalog. These two things.
Big or small.
Right.
Like that's pretty much it. Okay.
Which I want to point out really helps you understand the decision a lot of people were making, because you shot that guy. We've talked about him in detail.
Yep. I have done that.
If you were just looking for personal protection, and imagine trying to carry this in a holster on your hip.
I mean, presumably I have a solid holster on my hip with solid leather holding it up.
This still feels like a saddle gun to me.
It kind of does with that extra weight.
Would you rather
in
have
there.
that on the horse or on yourself?
On the horse?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, let's go ahead and get your feeling. We haven't shot the baby Dragoon version because it was unshootable.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But just ergonomically, how does that feel?
Well, definitely smaller. So there is that. Much more compact. Definitely more girl jeans ready. Although still not able to fit in a girl jean pocket, I want to point out.
Nothing fits in a girl
Everything
jean
has
pocket.
failed that. However, this feels like it would be lost on a saddle. I feel like I could have hundreds of these on a saddle.
Just carry a brace.
Yeah, right? No, this is definitely more hip-worthy for someone of a smaller stature, especially myself. For you, it feels like this would be a little small for you.
It's almost awkwardly sized for a holster. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is a pocket model. Now, of course, at that time, we're talking about a coat pocket. Like
Right,
a
that's what
pocket
I'm
pocket.
thinking,
We're
like
not
a
thinking
vest or a coat, essentially.
Yeah, or even like a satchel or something, you know.
Sure.
We're not necessarily thinking of, a modern little pants pocket, right?
No.
But, and then
Maybe
also,
cargo pants.
don't forget, by the way, they came in different barrel lengths. You know, we're talking about 6 inches down to 3, right?
Right.
So, fair
Kind
bit
of
of
neat.
range.
You could get the actually most compact being 3. That would fit definitely in a lot of pocket.
Now, you wouldn't have the ability to load on the gun.
Nope. So I have to walk around basically preloaded on my little safety notch on the backside,
Right.
which is a singular notch, which I kind of miss having all little safety nipples on the backside.
Now, there is some backwards confusion. A lot of people think of the sort of mythos around the 1873 single-action army about carrying with one empty chamber as a safety feature because of the half-cocked position of the hammer not being strong enough, and if you drop it, it could snap, and then the hammer would still fall, discharging the firearm. This doesn't have that problem because you weren't supposed to carry it half-cocked. You were supposed to carry it lowered on the safety nipple. So you
Right.
would need a lot of inertia to get the hammer to go back far enough to then sling forward, not catch on the half-cocked position.
You'd have to try really hard to get it to fail that way.
You kind of have to have it hit the ground hard enough to have it diesel back and then hit the ground hard enough again to overcome the notch.
I mean, the odds of that happening are pretty out there.
No, you have to over travel the safety position, the half-cock position, in order to get the next percussion cap into the right alignment.
Right.
So you'd have to go past 2 notches, essentially, and then somehow get back past 2 notches. It's very unlikely to accomplish.
And then this boy's in 31, correct?
Yeah, 31 caliber bore.
Okay. Yeah, it is kind of sucked that we are on a smaller caliber, but we've got that compactness as a result of that too.
It's certainly not what you would call a fight stopper. You saw in the video, we loaded her up with a double, actually, with the little
Not this guy, but our other
no,
boy.
that guy. The little flask that we had available to us, which I don't actually have with me at the moment, but the little baby Dragoon flask that was available.
Right.
That thing, we threw 2 charges out of it to really fill up the cylinder. So we were running as much powder as we could get in, well, technically this one, not the one she's got.
Right.
We were running as much powder as we could get in there and still have the ball down and clear that muzzle very well. Because, frankly, they're very thick-walled, being only a 5-shotter, and especially with modern steel, you'd have to I mean, don't put smokeless, for God's sake, people, but with black powder or Pyrodex, you'd be struggling to find a way to blow this up, right?
Right.
So we went hot. And even going hot, I did not see a lot of power.
I didn't either, no. I mean, target accuracy-wise, not too bad with it, I would say. However, actual stopping power, I think it'd take a few rounds to really kind of put a man, or stop a man from coming at me.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, well-placed is well-placed.
Not true.
So it's a little bit iffy. 31 is one of those weird zones where I don't feel like that's what a lot of people would think of as a stopping power cartridge, but it certainly was a strong deterrent.
Sure.
In an era, especially a lot of people like to point this out, that our understanding of disease and wound cleaning and surgery were very low
Or
back
choose
then.
Ballistol.
So a 31 caliber ball, while it might not kill you very quickly, it could kill you a week later really well.
Yep, that's true. So you may not win that war, but you may win, or win that fight, but you may win the war, essentially.
Yeah, you end up with like sepsis from the surgeon digging around and you trying to get it out.
Right.
So it could be pretty deadly. The trick is whether or not it's immediately deadly, but still,
Right.
it's that versus any number of other 31 caliber, because by the time you get up to a 36
Yeah.
on, let's say, a pepper box,
Okay.
you're adding a lot of weight. So this is lighter than a competing pepper box at the time, even in 31.
Now, I'm thinking price-wise, though, you might not be able to afford carrying more than one, though, because the convenience of having 2 would be even better since
Oh, no,
they're
that'd
so
be
light.
radically expensive. I think they were only like $5 less than which at that point would have been 20%, so 20% less than this. I'm actually struggling. There's a lot of authors that comment on this stuff, because most of this Colt stuff was written about so long ago, And these guys don't always include their sources. They just say things. So I'm told it went for $20, but I haven't found an original advertisement.
Oh, weird.
Or a primary source. I've only had
nice to find,
sort of secondary writings about
All
it.
right.
So I assume they were $20, but I mean, that's
a lot.
number one, that's steep. Yeah,
Yeah.
at that time, that's steep.
That's a lot.
It's only 20% less than this. I know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd probably go for that in that case.
Yeah,
I'd probably just go for that because it's a 20% difference. I'd rather go for the big boy and definitely confirm I'm putting him down.
Do you have any hope of concealing this?
No, I don't. I'm thinking I'm traveling with it. I guess if it's specifically I'm using it for concealment purposes and it's for that reason, then yeah, obviously have to go with the smaller boys.
We'll talk more about that in a second, though.
Okay.
Okay, ergonomically, though, let's get back to this.
Sure.
We didn't shoot that one.
No.
How does it feel to the hand?
Well, it definitely fits in my hand. It feels pretty comfortable. How long is this barrel? Is this like 4 inches or 5?
No, that looks like a 5 or 6 incher.
Yeah, okay.
It's one of the longer ones.
You know, and actually, it feels pretty good to point.
We have no front sight, so good luck with that.
Right? No, I'm noticing that. I was like, where did it go?
I was going to repair this thing up, and the deeper I went, the more problems I found.
That's impressive.
And I just I think you can pull the trigger in half cock right now. No, just like it'll just fall. I mean, you're not.
Yeah, no, I was just being kind to the.
Yeah,
you totally can. Well, that's a good half cock, ain't it?
Well, I took it apart and I tried rehardening it, and the process that has worked for me a million times did not work on whatever bubblegum that's made out of. So I was going to have to try a number of different. I gave up. I frankly gave up.
No, I totally believe that.
Yeah.
That being said, I mean, there's nothing that's that unusual. I've got a nice space here carved out on the side of the face of the gun back here that I can put caps on there pretty comfortably. I still have to take it apart in order to load it. Not really anything I'm not used to there with these black powder boys.
Actually, the funny thing is I wish the one thing they got right on this was the ability to do the loading off gun, because I do think that this is not that inconvenient compared to loading with the rod.
You were talking about that as a possibility, yeah, and then that reproduction, unfortunately, was just not of decent quality enough. I like the concept of it. You're not wrong. It's kind of nice to have all your tools there that you might need on the gun.
I get it that could be slightly easier if you had to reload in a fight. Mm-hmm. But good Lord, the reload time is so long anyway.
Right.
And then the extra weight and complication of that, I feel like this isn't really that bad of a...
No, it's actually a good solution for potentially keeping the gun light while having everything you need to load the gun right there.
Realistically, the biggest risk of having it this way is just losing stuff when you're interrupted doing things.
Right.
Like, it's just more crap to keep accounting of on the trail.
Are you having fun there with
It's
your puzzle
got
piece?
the spring doesn't keep you from taking it out, but it sure as heck keeps you from putting it in, which is...
yeah, that's fine.
Again, I don't know who made this gun. Mm-hmm. I know I've complained about it this whole episode, but I'm just going to keep complaining about it. You know what? Here, let's get a little product placement as Okay, well, no, that's not what that's for.
No.
Don't
use your Ballistol can as a hammer. Don't do that.
Let's just put this one down. Let's go with the one that we actually got a shot.
Oh, nice. Thank you. I get to actually play with one I shot.
Yeah,
wow.
that's the Uberti. And I actually like the quality of their stuff.
I think this is actually slightly heavier.
Yes, I agree.
That's impressive. It looks smaller, and of course, it's just denser. I get it, with the rod included and everything. Actually, that's a really nice loading rod, I will say. Wow, it feels very smooth, actually, by comparison. The latch also held really well, I noticed, which, thank you. I swear to God, it fell on the Patterson, God knows, every practically time. The Walker as well. We finally have a latch that seems to do well.
In those guns' defense, you're throwing more energy.
That's true.
And the actual latch itself, well, the Walker didn't have the latch, and then these guys had different latches, and then we had the weird latch on this one.
Oh, yeah.
But there's more mass on these latches, so they're more prone to dieseling under inertia.
God, you're not wrong about that cylinder. Every time I look at it, it kind of hurts my eyes.
Yeah, that weird double embossing.
Yeah, I kept staring at it when I was I reviewed the footage afterwards to confirm all the close-ups and stuff like that, and I kept thinking, is that out of focus? No, it's just looking at this damn cylinder. It's terribly struck.
Yeah.
Okay, half cock, or putting it to the half cock position, pretty smooth, full cock. It's a pretty easy light hammer to manipulate. It's actually really nice, and the placement on it's not too bad either. I think this might be just the perfect size for my hand, because look at that.
Have we had a percussion gun that fits in your hand?
No, we haven't had one that fits in my hand in such a way that The grip doesn't have me far away from the hammer manipulating it forward of my actual middle finger, which that's kind of awkward to do if anyone's ever tried that. The grip actually fits perfectly in my hand. I'm right there with the trigger. This literally might be the best placement I've had so far with a Reprocussion gun.
Yeah, I'm a little crowded on it if I take a hold.
Well, yeah, if it fits my hand, God knows.
Yeah, but...
Yeah.
I mean, still, it's as much as it doesn't, it's a little crowded in there. Let me get the focal plane.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the end of the world. I can still get half my pinky on there.
Yeah, that's true.
That's actually pretty good. And then,
now, do you feel like you have to crowd up to reach the trigger, though? Because I don't.
I'm sliding down a little bit for the trigger. And frankly, I'm wrapping the pinky is all I'm doing. I'm just going to wrap the pinky as a base. And then I've got a nice square hold with the other two fingers.
There has to be barely any recoil when you shoot it.
The grip is actually fairly natural, more so than the larger guns. I actually find the drop on these big boys to be a little bit weird for where I'm pointing. I'm actually not a fan of the Colt 1873 Single Action Army standard grips for that reason.
Oh, man. People are not going to like hearing that.
The drop on this is actually quite natural. There's a lovely swoop to the back that's getting up under
Fits
my
right there in
palm.
the palm. Yep.
So
it actually does feel quite nice.
That you must be square on it, though. That's got to feel perfect.
It literally does feel perfect to me because where it lines up. Now, granted, I don't have the option that you have, which is to utilize this swoop quite as much in your palm. Like, I know you can use it to kind of use for more leverage.
Right.
However, I don't really need it because I don't really have a heavy hammer to operate. I don't have a really heavy trigger to try to manipulate. There's nothing I'm doing crazy that requires me to have the extra leverage.
Now, do you miss having a knuckle at the rear?
No, I guess because the knuckle was kind of more critical for issues like riding up due to recoil or...
double action pull.
Yeah, double action pulls, that can be critical for that too. But for this one, the pull's very light, single action. The hammer's easy to manipulate. The knuckle really just wasn't critical on this one. And the recoil didn't have me riding up on it. There was nothing. Yeah.
Even under double load, it was just like, poof.
Yeah, literally just a poof.
I'm okay
with that.
We showed it earlier. We tried the bullet at 95 yards, essentially. It was a 100-yard target, and we were standing just in front of the benches.
Is this the one that Rob shot?
Right.
Yeah.
So we're standing just in front of the benches at what should be 100 yards on steel. And actually, I say 95, but I think we were shooting a little crooked. The distance in front of the benches that we were at...
It might have been more.
It might have actually been right at about 100 because we're shooting cross. So that if you... Yeah, anyway. Do your geometry homework, folks. So... Yeah, probably almost 100-yard shot.
That's pretty rad. Do we want to show that real quick?
I mean, we can again. So, fun fact, that was the second time that happened.
Yeah.
Here's how it went. We were filming. We had light and other stuff to film, and we got all out of order.
Yeah.
We forgot to film the bullet. Well, we didn't even forget. We ran out of time to film the bullets.
Yeah, literally the lighting wouldn't have matched, so it wouldn't have looked good on camera.
We'll talk more about it in a second. We had tons of problems with the percussion caps. So we finally get a sequence that works.
Yep.
And then we just go, oh my God, we're out of light. We got to go get high speeds. We're not going to be able to get the bullets.
Yep.
So I, with the light kind of fading and working off a cell phone, and there's all sorts of reasons that I'm playing around with Rob later on. And I load up 2 of the bullets just so I could understand how they worked, how they performed, what was going on.
Yep.
And so I charge them up, I load them up. I've got 2 in there, and I think, well, I'll take 2 pot shots at... I don't want to walk all the way to the pistol range.
No.
So I'm going to just stand here and shoot at that target that is 100 yards away. And so I just click, boom, and I don't think anything's going to happen. I'm just doing it just to feel the recoil and everything. I just boom, ping. And everybody's going, oh, because everybody saw.
Right.
So I went, oh, God, I wish I'd filmed that. So I was like, well, here, Rob, you can take the second one because I've got my hit. And we were teasing him because the Enfield had given him such a hard time because it was, frankly, an awful gun.
Yep.
So he's sitting there cursing himself for being bad at handguns when in reality he's just been given the worst gun.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, here, Rob, you take it. And so he's just like, ha, ha, ha. So he clicks, and he actually takes his time to aim, as you saw in the video, and boom, ping, and you see the reaction, right? So that's 2 in a row. That was 2 for 2.
Accuracy's pretty rad.
Then we gave it to another friend, and he missed wildly, and I won't say who, because that's on him now. But
that's his shame to bear.
Yeah, because at that point, that became a game. I actually want to go out and play that game some more because it was so entertaining to do with the little 32.
That's pretty good.
But frankly, really impressive.
Oh, yeah.
From a reproduction 31 caliber, black powder, lead bullet. That excellent.
Not too bad.
Imagine a 100-yard shot with that. That's excellent. It tells you the trigger is good, tells you all sorts of things are good. And then we saw your grouping on the range.
Yeah, not too bad.
How confident were you in that?
I was pretty confident in it, actually. Well, to be fair, I'm not shooting that far out. I'm just shooting at, 30 feet technically? So it's not that difficult to nail the targets with this. And I just can't see why I would actually feel any concern on it, frankly.
I have an unusual question for you.
Okay.
If all your percussion caps work perfectly on either option, and you had to choose between that...
perfectly, yeah.
Yeah. Well, modern reproduction percussion caps have their own issues.
Yes.
The old mercury fulminates were sensitive.
Oh, yeah.
The new stuff, not so much, so you struggle. But if you had to choose between this and that...
For what, just personal defense or for carry?
Just all of a sudden, a dude's up on you.
I mean, I think that I'll be able to get off more shots with this one. However, a single shot from that one
is authoritative.
Really authoritative. So
still this?
I think still that, technically, yes.
Because that is a big,
yeah, it's big.
Here, go to full cock right now, go.
Hold on, wait.
Okay, wait,
I do it for the draw.
Okay.
Okay.
And then we're going to do a draw now again.
Okay. All right, try to draw. Okay. Oh, shit, that's right, I forgot.
Which one is it that you want to pick again for defending yourself?
Maybe I've got more adrenaline pumping.
Okay. Adrenaline.
That's literally not how that works.
Okay. Oh, you did a lot faster, though.
I did do a little faster.
One, two, three, go.
Well, okay.
You're not even trying.
No, I'm getting ready now.
No,
okay.
you can't be ready. That's not a surprise attack.
Surprise attack.
Draw this one in a hurry.
Oh, well, I mean to be...
There you go. Y'all, see?
I didn't know I was
she has
doing it
no
right
ability
now.
to do anything in a hurry.
Oh my
I'm
God.
trying to switch her up here.
Okay, well, to be fair, I feel like
go.
this is losing its...
Yeah.
I lost my hand. Okay, you're not wrong. I can operate that one faster.
Uh-huh.
You might not be wrong on that front. All right, fair point.
I want to point out, by the way, to be fair to you. All right, let me get some speed up on it, and I won't even get my finger up on the hammer. Let's see. Okay, I grimaced. I threw wild. It's not that fast. Granted, I don't train on this. A lot of you are probably making fun of me because
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they're making fun of the crap out of us.
single action
This
guys
is
are just
not what we do.
what is your problem?
They're like, oh, I do this all day for breakfast.
And then I'll just do this one, thumb to the side, and just... it's just so much lighter and faster.
Okay, maybe that is better.
Yeah, you laugh, but sometimes ergonomics are king. This is why
yeah.
you got the guys that say, I carry a 45 because they don't make a 46, but then you have other guys that are going, shot placement with a 9mm, I have follow-ups. So there is some theory here. By the way, it's almost like there should be some sort of middle distance between these two.
Oh.
Which wasn't this, it was the 1851.
Oh, okay. Right,
this is actually that stretched to shoot 36. So... You want to talk about this?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's pass off and feel again.
What sort of warm feelings do you have about that?
You know what? Grip-wise, I can tell the grip is slightly larger.
Is it?
Very slightly.
Is it? Let me see.
I think so.
Let's find
Very
out.
slightly.
No, you're full of crap.
I'm not full of crap.
Hold those up for
Full
yourself.
of crap.
Don't try to gimmick me. Look. That is the...
No, I'm literally looking at it. It is slightly larger.
Berkey should be
I've got
making
these
those
lined up. Look at this.
Berkey-
I've got this lined up from top to top.
It's a slightly different drop.
The grips are slightly different.
Right,
You're full of crap.
They're both Ubertis. They're both built on the same frame.
So you know what? I grab that one and I feel it and I'm like, oh, that feels perfect. And I'm like, I put my hand on this one. This one feels slightly different somehow. It must be different. That's how that works.
You done?
Yes. Anyway, no, it's definitely got more length, a little maybe not as much weight to it, weirdly. This does feel lighter.
No way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is lighter. I think so.
Oh, you know what? It might be the cylinder being bored out more, despite the fact that it is jumped up.
Right. Maybe. I don't know. They feel, maybe it's pretty close. I'll have to double check the notes because now we have it in the script, so I could totally.
Yeah, I did weigh them. I don't think you're right, but
I could be wrong, maybe.
I'm pretty sure that one's heavier.
Anyway, all right. The hammer doesn't feel quite as smooth to operate on this one.
Well, this
doesn't
one's
feel
been
quite
shot
as
a lot more.
Oh, that's true. Maybe it's just shot in.
Yeah. We played with this one for a whole day.
Yep. I remember the lever on this one stayed up when I was shooting. That was pretty nice. Same style of loading. No real difference there. I guess the really only differences end up lying are different cartridge, so different recoil. Well, 36 instead of 31. The grip feels slightly different, and the hammer's not as easy to manipulate. That's it. That's really what it all boils down to. And I mean, obviously, I've got a longer barrel length here. So
In theory, that hammer should be the same manipulation on average.
Yes.
Because it's the same hammer.
Okay.
You're just feeling the difference between these two guns.
Yeah, that's fair.
So...
If I strike that from the record, then.
Okay, what was the recoil like? Because this certainly had a little bit more oomph.
I mean, there was a slight more oomph to it, but frankly, it really wasn't that much. It was just more than a poof, I guess, is a better way to put it.
Okay.
So, not bad.
Okay. Would you prefer to have a 36 caliber ball?
Ultimately, yes. I think it would be better for stopping somebody, frankly. I think it'd be a lot easier.
So if you could get that in this length?
To stop someone. Oh, that would be...
Or do you prefer the length?
The length would be better for a longer distance, but if I'm thinking in terms of concealment, maybe I would rather go with smaller boy size. Okay,
so if you're pocketing it...
That's better.
Okay, so if you're pocketing it, though, you'd like this length on that chambering?
Sure. I'd like to... That'd be fine, I think.
Okay.
Because if I'm thinking, like, how little... Remember how little recoil there was on that one? If there's just a small amount extra recoil coming from it, it's not that bad.
So everything working perfectly. No percussion cap problems.
Yep.
Between this and that?
Well, we've already disproven it. I'd pick this one.
Yeah, but is there more confidence there?
There's more confidence there, yes.
Okay. Now, it shouldn't necessarily have the same... I don't believe it has the same powder capacity as the 1851 Navy.
Okay.
You've handled 1851 Navies.
Yes.
We don't have one here for direct comparison at the moment.
Nope.
But instinctively, do you think you'd prefer that mid-size 1851 frame or this little compact frame?
It honestly just depends on if I'm thinking in terms of concealment versus more
like
utility
holster?
use.
Yeah, so if you've got it on a holster?
Yeah, if I have an exposed holster on my side, sure, I'll probably go with the 1851. But if I'm still doing it for concealment purposes, I'll go with my little 31 over here.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's honestly just coming down to what I want to use the tool for. It's the same thing when if I'm picking what knife to wear for the day kind of thing. Am I going out to whack the bushes in the backyard? Well, maybe I'll grab my Woodsman's Pal. If I'm just going to be open boxes, I'll just have a little pocket knife.
Okay, that makes sense.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
For me, frankly, the frame is just a little bit too small for me.
Yeah, it really does crowd you up.
So the only reason I would carry this is like as a holdout gun. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Just a little tiny thing.
A little extra security doesn't hurt.
That being said, having shot it, I thought I was not going to like this, like at all.
Really? You thought it was just going to be a little too crowded for you to actually be able to handle well?
It seemed like a pipsqueak little thing that was a high seller that we need to cover for the series, and I was going to be like, oh, okay, this is funny. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But realistically, handling and shooting it, I started to enjoy the gun itself, although there's a caveat there. And then especially once we started tinging steel at 9,500 yards, then I went, oh, there is untold potential in this little barrel, right?
Right, it's actually of decent quality.
Now, the downside of these, which has nothing to do with the original Colts and nothing to do with original caps.
Right.
Is
the caps.
The caps.
Right.
For whatever reason, these two guns, out of everything we've done for this Reprocussion series,
were the worst for caps.
10s weren't working, 11s weren't working, we were switching brands, like CCI, Remington, whatever. I mean, normally I can find a cap somewhere in our collection of odd caps.
Myriad of caps, yeah.
That will work fine. And there's something about these, and it's one of those moments where I went, I should have seen a slick shot, because everybody likes the slick shot nipples.
Right.
I should have seen if they had them available for these. Mm-hmm. But how would I have known to do that until I had problems? And frankly, they were in good shape. We just went out and tried shooting them, and...
Right.
Oh my God.
Such a nightmare.
And then black powder...
That took way too long.
In particular is a challenge for us, because our filming is an hour and 20 minutes away, so unless we have the time and forethought to get everything in for the next filming on the previous one,
right,
to test fire the black powders while we're filming some other rifle or something that day, then usually we actually don't get a lot of chances to test fire the black powders because you can't shoot them at the indoor range.
Right.
That's right around the corner. You know, we can't do any of that stuff. So we get stuck.
Makes it difficult.
Yeah, having to hike out just to see if they work or not. You know, that's like a big 3-hour commitment almost.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, travel, not let alone...
Right, to and from, a whole 3 hours, if you're not hitting traffic.
So in that regard, we're actually really muting our personal feelings on these guys, because how do you really feel about both of these after that?
Well, honestly, the shooting experience in and of itself was just abysmal with those caps. It was a nightmare to try to make sure I was doing everything perfectly for appearances for the camera, because I can't just go out and just shoot like I normally would shoot. I'm trying to make sure visually y'all can see what all I'm doing. I'm awkwardly trying to pick a cap out the side, but also still show the camera while handling it safely. Do you know how awkward that can get to try to do? I do.
Yeah, your natural instincts are all over the place. And then to be fair to you, you also still haven't quite picked up on that whole flip it up and jack it
No,
down.
I haven't yet. I haven't had the time to practice with it.
These gave you the
get it
best
into a muscle memory.
These gave you the best chance to do it because they're so small, though. Mm-hmm. So for me personally, when I'm shooting, I kind of like and kick the cap, which still is unreliable. The caps were fitting so awkwardly on these that they were hanging on in ways I have not seen
dear
before.
life. It was as if they did not want to leave that nipple ever.
Yeah, I mean, they would be half exploded, half choked up on it, and just unwilling to.
They'd fragment in such a way that even just the fragments would cling to it. It was impressive at that point.
And then that one in particular, the Navy.
Oh, that was the worst, yes.
This one, on 2 separate instances, had caps that refused to fire after being struck 4 or 5 times and had to be scraped off with a pocket knife.
We never had problems like to this extent with those caps.
No, but I'd have to disassemble the gun and scrape them off, which was a huge time sink.
Impressive.
And of course, a safety concern too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so definitely replace your nipples if you order one of these guys.
Yeah.
Because we saw it twice on these little cylinders. I'm not sure why.
Something not able to learn till we got out there, though. You're not wrong. They didn't look that bad.
But frustrations aside, I'm fairly impressed.
I am too.
I especially find this guy to be sort of the most unique thing that most people haven't heard of. You know, most people don't think of the Pocket Navy. They think of the Pocket Police that came after that's more derivative of this looks like a little baby 1851. The Pocket Police tends to look like a little baby 1860. But for people with smaller hands, this is fantastic.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Also, I can certainly see why the 1849 really became the women's gun in that time period. Like, you see this carried by various female figures in the West and even back east.
This really does just feel great.
Yeah, because
I'm not going to lie.
You could fit it in some pretty tight spaces.
I'd argue my hands are, you think, average for a woman?
Yeah, actually, I don't know. Maybe a little long-fingered.
And even if my hands were smaller, I could still see this being a pretty comfortable hold. It would take quite a reduction in my hand size to actually make this uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, I would. The only problem with these guys collectively is getting a hold of the ammunition, the 31 ball.
Yeah.
There is.
How is it right now with everything for shipping?
It's not even that. And so people aren't really making the correct diameter. I can't remember the exact diameter. People aren't really making the correct ball. Mm-hmm. You can steal it supposedly from Shot, but it's not quite right. And then there is one company making a sort of a big gang mold. It's a little tricky to use from them, but at least they make it, and they're doing it for Shot reasons. But you can use it for this application, and I have. I can't remember their name, so we're gonna pop that on the screen right now.
Okay, you popped it.
Yeah. Just word of warning. It's very easy to burn yourself with that thing, and then the sprue is a little wild, but you get the hang of it.
Right.
So I don't have the capacity to make myself ammunition for that little guy.
Cool.
So that's nice. And that really is like the biggest challenge to owning your own Reproduction 1849. But I think they're kind of, I'd give them a little more plus up. They're sort of like the least appreciated thing in the reproduction market right now. Mm-hmm. I see them everywhere. They don't go for a lot. I'm not even sure if they're still being produced.
I mean, obviously the quality is going to differ depending on your reproduction.
I think there's a handful of these sort of things laying around. I'm not sure
that's
who put
why
them
I'm saying it can vary.
But these are the ones that are like baby Dragoon style with no loading lever, and you can see it with the cylinder gap, especially like this gap at the front between the barrel assembly and the cylinder. Mm-hmm. If it's tighter, it's one of these older style ones, but the Obertis are nice and big.
I also noticed when the key is in that one, there's a significant gap to one side of that whenever the key's fully inserted.
It's
crazy.
That is its own nightmare that needs a ton of work to be what it should be.
Yeah.
But the Obertis are nice.
Oh, yeah. This was actually quite pleasant to shoot.
Yeah, they're pleasant. They're surprisingly affordable until this episode drops, I guess. And
well, no, they probably still are. We don't think we make that big of a splash.
Yeah. There's a lot of them out there. But certainly something worth checking out. That and, of course, the Pocket Navy. But realistically, my one takeaway, like the thing I really picked up on this, can you believe that between this and that, which one made Colt more money?
I mean, I can't see why this one would not be way more marketable to your average Joe / Jill.
Right. Yeah, you're going to the store. Yeah. It's like you're going to come home to the wife and you're carrying either this or that.
I mean, she might not even know you're carrying this for all she knows.
Yeah, you could sneak that into the house.
All right, this one's a sneakable one.
No, there's something...
This one, Doc has like 5 in his vest, I'm sure.
I know a lot of you guys are guys, and you're going to be like, I want the big one. Boom, 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 boom.
That does sound like the words you would say.
But this is an era of conservatism. You know, people were, and I don't mean politically. I mean just the idea of I'm not going to blow all my money. I'm not going to buy more than I need. People were very much within their means back then.
And then slightly cheaper.
You're also, frankly, going to look a bit like an asshole going around with this on your hip back then. Like just out in the open, a lot of places. We like to think that, you know, the entire United States was the Wild West back in the day. Not so much. Even the Wild West wasn't as wild as you think it was. As a matter of fact, a lot of towns had rules against carrying firearms in town. No one would know you had that one.
It's true.
So there actually is a lot more marketability there than there is here.
Mm-hmm. A lot more potential. I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, overall thoughts.
Overall, I was at least happy to experience one really fantastic condition one for a change. One that just fit my hand. One that just seemed to work properly, except for the caps, obviously. Still don't know what was up with that.
Yeah, we were at the beginning of the civilized Colts.
Really? This is the beginning of the civilized Colts?
Yeah, think about it. The Patterson was wild. This is not even as big as the Walker, and it's awkward as sin.
Yeah, that's fair.
After this, they get to a size in between these two for most of what we're going to talk about next.
Okay.
So I don't know. This is the civilization. This is the civilizing of Colt in my mind.
I guess it is kind of interesting to see them just be like, oh, let's make it as big as possible. Wait. Let's actually get back to being small again.
Yeah.
Wait. We screwed up, boys. Let's go back.
Well, see, the problem with the first one was, A, it was awkward, B, it was weak, and C, it was too small.
Okay.
Okay. So we're just going to make it like
big and
super
awkward.
robust, but titanically large. Okay, that's a little bit too big. Okay, how about this? Okay, but still too big. Okay, how about this?
Perfect.
No. Okay, how about here?
I want that porridge.
Yeah.
Give me that porridge.
It's the Goldilocks phenomenon.
Yeah.
Like, just, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're almost there, folks. We're almost to the glorious 1851.
We're almost into the right bed. I promise.
All right, well, I'm going to get out of here before the bears eat us. Y'all have a good one.
Night, everybody. Well, I've learned I enjoy giving a lot on Christmas, so I try very much to make sure there's way too much food inside this household for
you went
Christmas
nuts
Day.
with the food. I'm still recovering.
I know. I made a charcuterie board per Susie's request, and then I also had the male equivalent of that on standby in case Othais needed the male equivalent, which, by the way, that was spray trees with Triscuits, nachos with cheese, and what was the other? Oh, cheese balls. I had the male equivalent.
Cheese poops?
Yeah, cheese poops. I had a male
pigs
equivalent.
in a blanket?
Pigs in a blanket, too. So I had the male equivalent of that on standby.
Is that the male equivalent or
side.
it's like the little boy equivalent?
Yes.
A card format for the shorts, like a trading card, which reminded me that I had actually tried a trading card project years ago, many years ago. And I had the design work all laid out and then abandoned it.
Right.
The thing is, I had only thought about doing them as print cards. I had never thought about doing them as a emulation in video, like Swede Bro suggested. So, special thanks to him for the idea.
It's like super awesome holographic card that just changes now.
It was great because he gave me an idea that I already had components for on top of being a good idea. So I went, oh, this is awesome. You know, this is perfect. So that was, we pivoted there on the shorts. Hopefully they're not too annoying. I will say one thing I like about it is if you look at the shorts tab on the desktop, as we add more, it's going to look like a whole deck of cards.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like when you have
that's
the
going to
card
look really
wallet.
cool.
Yeah.
But we needed to get some B footage, and we were like, do you want to help us with this Lewis gun? Yes, I would.
No, it was the Hotchkiss Portative, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the Hotchkiss Portative. Yeah. Or not the Portative.
No, it was the Lewis gun. It
1914.
was the 1914 and the Lewis gun were available.
We're like, we have to get this B-roll footage. Do you want to come give us a hand? And he was like, yeah, I guess you can twist my arm on this one.
Yeah, he was so happy.
As the hammer falls, the hand skips down the ratchet tooth of the cylinder, compressing its spring and then popping it back into place.
An imperfect system, but at this point, we've got square studs, we've got round trigger guard, we're probably looking at a roller hammer. This is what most people consider the final evolution of the holster size.